This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. On this episode, we have an outstanding guest. Who would you trust for fantasy football stats and numbers more than a certified public accountant? Now, our guest, he's not only a CPA, but he has been certified by the Joe Bryant as the dynasty captain at Footballguys. It's none other than Jeff Bell.
Thank you,
Welcome
Kevin.
in.
Thank you. That is a kind intro. I'm thrilled to be here. When you reached out, I said, I got to do it. I know we got an opportunity to connect a little bit in Canton, and I know your involvement with Footballguys as well. And so it was just an exciting opportunity, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you on here. You're someone that I have a lot of respect and admiration for. I love the way you carry yourself. Your impact on this fantasy football community has been wonderful to see over the last few years. So it's a pleasure to have you on.
You're kind again. I don't know. I'm just a random guy out here just doing a thing.
Well, I love it. I see what you're doing, and it's been great for the fantasy industry for sure. Now growing up in Ohio, I imagine that you had an early exposure to football, the game of football. Take us back to when your love for sports and football began.
All through childhood. I mean, I couldn't pinpoint one moment. I've just always been into sports since I can remember, since kindergarten, first grade. That was what my friends at school did. That was what I was really into. I was the sports guy, and so like I was way deep into it. I lived in the country, and there wasn't a lot going on, so I collected baseball cards and basketball cards, football cards. I would sit all day long and just make teams, and I would shuffle my cards up. And all the collectors out there are going to cringe hearing that, but I would create teams, run the stats for everything, and really kind of playing my own version of fantasy sports before I even got an opportunity to do that in terms in general. So that is since I can remember. I'm playing Tecmo Super Bowl as a kid since I can remember doing that. My becoming a Bills fan was completely random. It was my dad was into sports, but he was into like auto racing and golf, and he wasn't really huge into team sports. And so I didn't have like an at-home major influence guiding me towards what my fandom would be. And when I was in school, like kids were kind of like, who's your favorite football team? And I was like, well, I don't even know my choices because it was like kindergarten. And they were like, well, the Bills were in the Super Bowl then. And I was like, sure, I'll be a Bills fan. Like, let's go. And so that's kind of how that happened. And I've certainly earned my fandom over the last handful of years. Or there was a 20-year stretch that tested every ounce of fandom that I earned through that. So,
yeah, for sure. Now that's funny because I credit my my early intro into fantasy to just as a kid loving sports cards and stats, like the stats on the back of the cards were everything, and then also going into video games. Those video games like like Tecmo, where they started to have stats. Like I love Baseball Stars because you could do stats, right? So
yes,
so that's funny. Yeah, baseball cards, video games, getting me into stats is kind of what I attribute my early interest into fantasy too. So that's awesome. And then the Bills, that's cool. As a Seattle sports fan, I did not have a lot to work with. I mean, Griffey came, that was amazing. Seahawks were not good. Sonics, Gary Payton and Sean Kemp were great. But I definitely became early on like a fan of the players, and so I loved that Bills team. The Bills. Again, like Bruce Smith and Cornelius Bennett, and obviously Andre Reed and Thurman Thomas and Jim Kelly. Like all those, I loved that squad. I mean, it's probably the best team that's never won a Super Bowl. I'm sure you would agree.
They're up there for sure. And actually, I was a Supersonics fan as a kid. Like that was my go-to team. Like you said, talk about the players, but I loved Sean Kemp and Gary Payton and Detlef Schrempf. And it was like I only had like 4 TV channels, so I could only really watch like the playoffs for NBA or what was on Sundays. And so it wasn't like I had a natural pull to what would have been the Pistons. Probably the Pistons and the Cavs would have been the local teams. And the Pistons were very good when I was younger, but when I started to become cognizant, that team had kind of fallen apart a little bit, but it was right in that prime of that. I just love that Supersonics team. And really my fandom in terms of NBA, I'm a huge NBA fan, but I've just really struggled to connect the way that I was a Sonics fan when that team went away. And so, I mean, there's rumors, there's whispers that we're going to get a Sonics back. And so I will rekindle that fandom for sure when they come back. But yeah, I've always been into baseball, basketball, football were the big ones.
Yeah, I mean that's my story growing up too. But I you are welcome to come back. Obviously, Sonics, they're coming back. That theft was something that we have not
Yes.
gotten over with, right? So, fantasy football. When did you first discover that game?
Really, my memory in discovering fantasy football is about freshman year of high school. I remember SI.com had this, and it was like a salary cap game, and you could play with your friends. And so you'd go in, and you'd pick your players. I remember it was Kurt Warner's rookie year, and so like you would have the salary cap, and then like values would fluctuate week to week, but you'd have your team locked in at where you bought them. And so I bought Kurt Warner right after week 1, and he was dirt cheap. And so
Uh,
I got him then, and he broke out that year. It was the greatest show on turf year. And so that was really my first intro into it. It was something that like I kind of knew about. Like I remember my dad talking about being in a fantasy league at work. And so it was something that I wanted to do because of my involvement and interest in sports. But those were really, the internet kind of became a thing in my life when I was in about 7th or 8th grade. And so that was like pre-internet days essentially. And so SI.com was the first one. And then Yahoo. I was on doing public leagues on Yahoo was where I did a lot. And I got really rotisserie baseball on Yahoo on public leagues. I did that quite a bit. And then football leagues on Yahoo as well, public leagues there. It really wasn't until college that I was able to get a good group of friends together to do kind of a home league to set that up. I just never, like high school, we could never find enough people to do it really. But yeah, it was, so that was the intro, like having those salary cap challenges. And so that's just naturally led into just understanding and playing multiple different game types. So
sure. Now that's funny because again, like me, like it was a sporting news fantasy challenge that I found. Like I saw,
okay.
you know, I saw an ESPN documentary once, or like a little piece on Sports Center about fantasy. So I kind
Yeah.
of thought, I love stats. This sounds good. And then I just opened up a sporting news maybe a couple years later, saw this challenge. That was my first taste too. So it was the same kind of thing, like a rotisserie, like a rotisserie scoring challenge. Pre-internet. That's how I broke in. So that's awesome. So then you started playing. Obviously, did you start consuming content right away? Or are there people that you started consuming content of earlier on? Like, do you remember the beginning days of fantasy content for you?
I do. Andy Behrens is one that I remember for a long time, and I've gotten the opportunity to connect with Andy. He's fantastic. That's meant a lot. And then Matthew Berry on Page Two. Going back to Page Two on ESPN when it was Bill Simmons and Matthew Berry. I feel like we're on Page Two. Matthew Berry on RotoPass or on RotoWire, just talented Mr. Roto. So I knew about Matthew Berry, was like my OG fantasy guy that I kind of followed with. But I like being a sports nut that I was, and then like I would just read ESPN constantly, like everything that
Yeah.
came up, like I would read. And like Bill Simmons is still my favorite. He doesn't really write anymore, but he's one of my favorite columnists. But yeah, Matthew Berry's stuff is something that I've been reading for 20 years now. So
It's amazing. Yeah, time flies, obviously. So do you have like a home primary league that goes way back?
we do have one that goes back to about 2005, but it's kind of been like shuffling, rotating. It's just kind of like people come in and come out, like type thing. And so it's not like we have a core 12 that have been together for the whole time. It's really just kind of morphed, and so I've been the commissioner of that since 2005. And so as it's really interesting because it's like almost to look at the league is just chapters of my life of like who was, because I don't know. I mean, it had a couple different jobs, or like you start in college and move around and whatnot. And so the league has really become like a hodgepodge of like, well, I worked with this person then when we needed an opening. And so it's a dynasty league. Now we started a dynasty league about in 2020 during when the dynasty explosion was going on. We converted, we really stepped it up. We started out just your standard redraft league, and then we introduced auction drafts, and then we introduced keepers, and then we like just kind of progressed up. And so as there's a handful of people that have been in it from the start, but then also just different people that in different stages of my life of like joined the league.
That's the best. I mean, with my home league, it's the same thing. It's friends from elementary school, junior high, high school, college, just and family members, just all together. So it's I love that. I mean, that's what I love about fantasy is that connection. Keeping connections, right? So
Yes.
do you guys do live drafts? Is it local or is everybody spread out these days?
Um, so when we were doing the auction for redraft, we would do a live draft, and we would run it on ESPN, but like it would be about like six of us would be able to get together here in Columbus, and then a handful of people would be remote or wouldn't be able to make it that night. Since we've really kind of lost that because going to the dynasty league, we just don't get together for the rookie draft, and
Sure.
it's something that it's like the last couple of years, like I want to rekindle that, and so I've been trying to, but it's like August is just insanity. And so like
Yeah.
we between my wife's a teacher, and so back to school with that, and then all the work doing with football guys and making sure getting ready for the season. It's been the kind of thing of like, well, hey, let's do this thing. And then you those weeks fly by, and then you're like, okay, well, we talked about doing this and now it's a day before and we have not done this. So the
Yeah.
last couple of years have kind of ended up like that. I need to be more intentional about that because I do miss that. I really, really do miss that live draft and having that auction together. I think auction is the premier way to draft and do a redraft or do a keeper. You can't beat it, and thoroughly enjoy that. We do kind of do a live draft. So the last 2 years in Canton, we did in our Airbnb, and we had, let's see, 2 years ago we had maybe 8 people in our league that were kind of, there was 5 of us staying together at the Airbnb and 3 people came over on Saturday night. And then last year we got a huge Airbnb, and I think there was 15 of us that were staying there. And so we have a 12-person league off of that we did a live draft on Saturday night. We do the way that we did it this past year was on Friday night we did a snake draft, and then on Saturday night we did an auction draft. And so but the auction draft was kind of the main event, so that's
Yeah.
the in-person event. I have not been able to make it to a Scott Fishbowl event. That my family vacation lands during Scott Fishbowl week, and so it's butting up between like the live events are like either the weekend before or the weekend after. And so it's
Yeah.
just a little bit too much to say, hey, honey, like I know we're getting ready to go on vacation, but I'm going to be in Cincinnati for the entire day to
Yeah.
do a fantasy football draft. And then we're going to leave at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning with the kids. I'm not going there.
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard. Now, yeah, I hosted the Seattle last year, and then I went down to Trophy Smack this year. So fun. I mean, so
Yeah.
amazing. But family comes first. So I totally respect that. When did you first discover Devi?
Devi was when I first discovered Devi, the concept of Devi was about 2020. I think that I mean, I was kind of came in with that wave of COVID creators, for lack of a better term, and so that then just kind of full blown. And I had always been a college football fan, always been a huge NFL draft fan. I was always the type, even going back, like I remember my in college, my roommate was into the draft as well, and we would just hole up like and that was back when it was just Saturday, Sunday. And so it was just kind of one of those things that, like, the people that knew us were like, well, you can't talk to Jeff and Sean because this weekend they're just going to be holed up and ordering pizzas and watching the entire draft coverage. And so that's something that I've always had a huge interest in. And so discovering Devi, of being able to translate that into fantasy football, was a natural step. I mean, that was just, I already knew about the players. I was thinking about them for the draft and watching them on Saturdays. And so to be able to play fantasy on an element of that was a very natural step for me.
Yeah, sounds like a natural fit. I myself, growing up, the NFL draft was everything. It was,
Yep.
no one around me cared, but every Saturday and Sunday,
Yep.
I'd watch the whole thing, and this was early on, so I appreciate where you're coming from with that. Now, in regards to other settings, is it too early, too soon to talk about guillotine? Because
Yeah,
you just got it. Like your roster was loaded, like
it was.
absolutely loaded. That's so brutal. Like
Yeah.
I witnessed it. I could not believe that all those players became available at the expense of you. So is it too soon?
No, it's not too soon. No, I'm to be completely honest, I am spread way too thin on leagues right now, and so I certainly wanted to win the league, but at the same time, to not have to think about another thing to go into is not the worst thing in the world. I was knocked out in that and the subscriber contest this past week, the same week,
No.
and so I was cruising in the subscriber contest too for Football Guys, and so I was just fell under the cut threshold there, and yeah,
Oh,
I mean, my guillotine league, I thought it was pretty loaded. I mean, I had
it
Puka
was.
Nakua. I drafted Puka Nakua, so I didn't have to spend any
Oh,
money on him. The only real spend I had was adding Patrick Mahomes when he was available because I kind of waited on quarterbacks. So, and it was just had a bad week. I mean, I
yeah.
think I was like top 3-ish in scoring on the year prior to that
Yeah.
week, and then I had Devonta Adams. He didn't do anything. Darren Waller got hurt. Patrick Mahomes had the flu game, and it was just you have the stacked guy. Puka Nakua didn't do anything, and so you get these stacked rosters, but then if you don't have that one player to save you and to pull you through that week, you go home, and so
You
it
get
is what it is.
chopped.
But
You get
it's
chopped.
it's actually the second time I did it. I was chopped week
Okay.
1 last year.
Ah,
So like I like week 1 last year, my two early picks were Kyle Pitts and Lamar Jackson. And
no.
Kyle Pitts, we all know the story of Kyle Pitts starting last year. And then Lamar Jackson had a quiet week 1, and I was knocked out week 1 last year. And so I was feeling very much better about this year, obviously. But yeah, I thought even like as I would see the free agent pool open up, like it didn't seem like there were receivers worth going after, and it wasn't worth spending on another quarterback. And so I thought I was going to be able to kind of cruise through a little bit. I believe Dave was knocked out last week, and Dave kind of built his roster similar to mine because my
Yeah.
big hole was not having a running back, but then Dave didn't have a running back that I could go out and grab either because I lost James Conner, and then Tony Pollard has been a disappointment. So
Yeah. Well, with bye weeks coming, I had to get a lot of your players.
okay,
So if you need a
well
team to
I'm
root for,
glad I
it's
can
me.
spread to the community and help you out and go there.
I'm your team. I'm your team. Get behind me, and we'll take it. No, I'm in trouble this week, I think. So we'll see how that goes. But now you mentioned earlier you were a COVID content creator. So when did it all start for you creating fantasy football content?
So really the journey, so back in 2015, back when like the DFS boom happened, like that's when I started to kind of like orbit a little bit, where I knew somebody at Roto Grinders through a friend of a friend that I ended up in a league with them. And so like that was really my first intro into like understanding like fantasy Twitter and all that. I played in a league with that year. I remember I got pulled into a league with experts, and I was kind of like the last play, like the filler, because they wanted to do an auction league just to get some values, and I won the league, and that was a lot of fun. But
Nice.
then talking to that person that I knew at Roto Grinders, it was kind of like he was kind of like, if you're not doing DFS content, it's really hard to get anywhere on redraft. And so you kind of have to have your niche. And like Dynasty wasn't like in my world yet. I didn't really know about Dynasty yet to have that path forward. So like it was kind of one of the, like I always wanted to be a writer, and always going back, and but I was a little bit too practical in school to pursue becoming a sports writer. So I became a CPA, and that's a completely different path to go down. So I kind of backburnered it. I had kids, like I just didn't really even think about it. It was kind of, for the longest time, I was just convinced you needed to be in an elevator with Matthew Berry and give him the perfect pitch, and that's how you became a fantasy writer. And so I didn't even have a clue how to get involved. And so then COVID kind of came around, and like many, I just kind of started to fall down the rabbit hole of, you start to peel back the layers, you find more people. And I know JJ Zachariah, I always say his last name wrong. Zachariason,
Zacharyson.
Zacharyson. Yes. I apologize, JJ, but I always say his name wrong, and I apologize. I'm so
You're not
terrible
the
with
only one. There's
like
so many
saying
people
things
do it.
wrong. Like I discovered him, I just really dug him, and discovered Scott Fish, and so then it was kind of found out about the Scott Fish Bowl, but I was like I found out about it like too late. Like basically, like and like the invitations had gone out. It just wasn't going to be an option to get into. So then I started to kind of follow that and see that. And Scott had a tweet about the satellite tournament, and so the satellite tournament was going to open up, and he was kind of like, pay attention, like we're going to tell you when. And so when it came open, like jumped on that immediately. I set my notifications for Scott, jumped on that immediately. And so I got involved in that satellite tournament. And that was like first opportunity. And it was, I remember Scott Fishbowl week of 2020 was, I remember like my good friend Steph and Dave and Troy King, like seeing all of them kind of like come onto the scene. And I was kind of like seeing them like get picked up and being able to different opportunities. And I was just kind of like lingering out there where like, I don't know if I just wasn't really like, I didn't have a lot of followers on Twitter, so it didn't feel like worth tweeting. And so like I would reply to things, but like I wasn't putting my own original thoughts out there too much. And then kind of as the fall went along, like I was watching Fantasy Intervention was basically invented then. And so I watching that and really enjoying that content. And so I was kind of going along, and a different company had posted that they were looking for writers. And so I sent them a sample, and they passed on me. They decided they didn't need me. And so then it was kind of like, okay, well, I took my shot. Maybe it's just not for me. And then I remember like about a month later, somebody had a tweet, and I couldn't even tell you who it was. Like basically, how do you get started in the fantasy industry? Like I don't understand like how these people have gotten started. And I just kind of replied like, hey, like I'm paying attention to this or whatnot. And that's when Jay Felicio reached out to me, and he was with Going for Two at that time. And so Jay reached out to me and connected me with Going for Two with Jeff Lambert. And that gave me an opportunity. It started to write some things. Some people that told me that they were really good that I was writing. And that's when I got kind of connected. I was in Jay added me to a big group chat. And so there was like 50 people in there, and Chase Vernon was in there. And so I wrote something, and Chase read it, and he was like, hey, like I run Fantasy Intervention. Are you interested in this? I was like, yes, very much so. And so then I joined the team, and that's when I was able to meet like really what became my core group of friends throughout this entire process between Dave, Steph, Corey Spalla, Taylor Cornell. Like, there's so many just great people that Cooter Doodle, of course, Amanda. And so like we were all just kind of friends. We've been in a group chat for like 4 years now. And it's just that's like who stayed at the Airbnb. And it's just that's our group now. That's our core. So that was kind of the journey, and just kind of started with Fantasy Intervention then. And Jeff Lambert was just huge for me. He helped me so much. He got me introduced to Fantasy Pros. And so I was doing some work. He kind of used the Devi angle to get me with Fantasy Pros. And so I started out with Fantasy Pros there, started doing work for them, and as this goes on, making sure I hit my deadline, turning in a good product, and asking for more, and continuing to ask for more. And that opportunity grew. Concurrent with that, Dave got involved with Footballguys. And so Dave has helped me more than anybody in the industry, probably, Dave Kluge. And, kind of floated my name to Joe Bryan. And so then that's when like kind of the introduction was able to be made there. Joe had a program that summer. He brought me and a couple other people in, kind of say, hey, like, why don't you just write a couple articles for us? Let's see how it goes, type thing. And again, and wrote something that people thought was okay. So, so that kind of opened up those doors, and then kind of that's been the journey.
Yeah. So how about the Devi Royale? When did that form? That show, that podcast?
So that was kind of concurrent with, on top of everything. Like it was the type of thing where once I got my foot in the door, I was like, I'm breaking this thing down. I'm going all the way. And so my wife has been fantastic through the entire thing, and she's picked up so much slack, and she encouraged me to go for it. And Debbie Royale was so Christian Williams was somebody that, and Kevin Coleman were two people that I had enjoyed their content. I had enjoyed interacting with them on Twitter, and thought they were very intelligent. They understood kind of, and I thought we had a pretty similar approaches in terms of our interests in fantasy football, what we like to do. And so I was talking to Jeff Lambert about like doing a podcast potentially, and kind of wanted to start my own podcast there. And so having, and those two were, immediately my mind went to them on I thought that we would be a pretty good team. And so like I just threw together a group chat. I said, and I was, Kevin and Christian didn't really know each other too well. And I was kind of like, just threw everybody in and said, hey guys, like I have this idea. Like, what do we think about this? And we really we spent like 2 months or so, like before we even did the first show, just kind of together, just talking to each other, like almost daily, really daily. I guess talk to them daily, and kind of getting to know each other and kind of building camaraderie before we even went out and did a show. And so that lasted. We slow rolled it. We didn't rush anything. We didn't just kind of start out of the blue. And so that gave us an opportunity to know each other pretty well. And so when we did start recording together, it was just natural. And now we've done, I mean, I think we're coming up on over 2.5 years of a weekly show. We've hit every single week for the last 2.5 years. And so that's over 100+ episodes. And so you're kind of, that was April of 2021 that
Wow.
that we started doing that podcast, that eventually snowballed into the Debbie Royale, became a brand into itself. That podcast got picked up by Footballguys, became the college football show for a period of time, and now it's the Dynasty show on Footballguys. And so that was just kind of a, things snowball. You show up, you work hard, you do all those things, and things.
Yeah.
As Scott Fish is somebody that I look up to quite a bit, and as he always says, work hard, be a good person, and things will work out. And so that's been kind of my mantra and what I've tried to do.
Well, yeah, you guys have a great show together. You definitely have a natural fit. It's so smooth. So that's great. Obviously, when it comes to Football Guys, the brand, the people behind it have such an incredible legacy and reputation in the industry. Tell me about your experience with Football Guys and your role as the dynasty captain.
Yeah. So again, like Matthew Berry is like my journey. And when he came out with Rotopass, like I jumped on it right away because it was the type of thing of like, it's, I think so much of the fantasy is like understanding how to peel back layers of the onion, and without knowing what you don't know, you don't know what you don't know. And so like if you don't have anybody to make that introduction, and I was really like the hardcore fantasy person out of that I knew out of my friends. And so when he came out with the Rotopass, I joined that right away. And so I started to poke around on some of the sites, and to that, Rotoviz and Footballguys just naturally stood out. And so I really enjoyed both of their content. And so Footballguys, joined the mailing list, and so started getting Joe's emails. I started listening to the Audible, became a religious listener to the Audible. And that was about almost 10 years ago now at this point, 8 to 10 years ago or so. And so really just kind of, it became my go-to site. And hearing Sig and Cecil and Matt Waldman and Gene Bramall and doing all that, it became, as the show starts, the ritual. And so it would be like, remember like Friday afternoon, I would get home, I would mow, I would listen to the Audible live from Thursday night every single Friday afternoon. As I would mow, I would kind of save it because I listen to podcasts all day at work. I would kind of save that one until like I'm going to mow, I'm going to unwind for the weekend, I'm going to listen to the Audible live from Thursday night. And so that's kind of been going on for almost a decade. And so I was very, very familiar with the brand. It was always kind of my goal. And it was kind of like my pie in the sky goal to be able to work for Footballguys. I'm a CPA, and that provides me a very nice living for my family. So I'm not somebody that's looking to work full time for ESPN. I think that's not going to fit my current family plans. And so Footballguys has just been the perfect offering of giving me opportunity to really dive in and push, but then so much understanding in terms of my work and my family as well outside of that. And I think it's been really just the perfect blend of everything there. And so, and Clayton Gray and Joe Bryan, and they're just so fantastic and understand. Not too much comes up to miss a deadline, but occasionally that does happen, and let them know, and they're perfectly fine with it. They understand life is bigger than what we're doing right here.
That's so cool. It's so cool how you found your way there. I know I've seen Joe, the way that he talks about you, the way that he yeah, I mean, just you can tell how proud he is of having you on board and how fond he is of you. So cool to see, and it's so cool to see that the whole thing came full circle like that. What
Yeah.
are your favorite like resources and features that come from Football Guys? And, like, what makes the website and the membership so special for you?
It's so interesting because like so much has changed. Like the consumer mindset is like, I don't know. I mean, make the content now. So it's like the consumer side of like I recommend everybody to check out the new rankings platform. That's great. I've always used it for like snap counts and things like that, like the stats off Football Guys, reading all the articles. I know that that's not a popular thing to do right now, but I really do think that that everything that goes up on the site is excellently written, and I think you can learn a lot from doing that. I've always just enjoyed the articles, and the Audible has always been, and the podcast family has always been the most things that I've enjoyed. And my consumption in terms of fantasy now is really via podcast. While I'm at work is where like I listen to other people, and it's really about like, my OGs and like Football Guys, and then like my friends hearing the work that my friends do as well is where a lot of my consumption now. But it's like in terms of like I kind of do like my own thing now. I've got weekly projections that I create on my own, and that feeds into my weekly rankings. And so um, I don't know, like it's all good. Like check the whole thing out.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, obviously, highly recommended. Let's talk a little bit about the fantasy football community. Obviously, you've mentioned all the different connections you've made and how these friendships have impacted your life so much. Let's talk about the expo and that experience. What has that experience meant to you?
It's just been it's for me it's two different layers on the expo because it's a work event, so like you're going to meet people and meeting subscribers and then networking with people that I only get an opportunity to talk to occasionally through like Twitter DMs or on replies, those types of things. Not the opportunity to talk to them as much as I would like. But that's kind of the first layer. But then the second layer is like seeing my friends and like spending the time together with friends and people that you truly do talk to these people every single day, and then you only see them like once or twice a year now. Like the Football Guys retreat in Las Vegas has been a great excuse to see people. And I got 3 young kids, and so I don't do a ton of traveling, or just kind of in that stage of life that I don't travel a lot. So the expo has just been a great opportunity to get all those friends together. And this year especially was great because we had the big Airbnb, and so there was about 15 of us, and it was just the right level of, we've known each other for multiple years now. We're sure that we're friends. Like now it's just like there's no pressure in this. We had a pool. We were just hanging out at the pool. And so just those different layers of the expo. And it's just been fantastic what Bob Long has put together there to really bring people together and to be able to make those new connections, but strengthen those friendships. And I think that that's a lot of what we're searching for in the fantasy community, is those friendships and strengthening those friendships, meeting new people. But I think, I don't know, I think that probably most of us are a little bit introverted, and so I think most of us that make fantasy content probably settle into our tight-knit friend group, and it kind of is natural because I think a lot of our personalities are that way. But it's kind of being able to weave those two elements together is great at the expo.
That's cool. That's awesome that you can get together with so many people and all experience it together. I'm
Yeah.
part of the hotel crowd, so it's kind of like where it's just one giant Airbnb, but a little
Yeah.
bit different. It sounds like that would be a really really cool experience. Let's dive into some rapid fire questions. Obviously, learn a little bit more about you and passion for fantasy, as well as some other topics.
Yeah.
What do you love most about fantasy football and the fantasy football experience?
Winning. No, it just adding the extra element. I just love watching football, and so like when I can add fantasy element onto it, I love team building. I mean, I'm the type that when I play Madden, I spend hours doing trades and team building, and then I just sim the games. Like, and that's been my ongoing joke on Dynasty is the perfect game mode for you, fantasy game mode for you, if you're the type of person that just builds teams in Madden and just sims the games. But I've always, my childhood dream was to be a general manager for a sports team, was what I really, really wanted to do. And so that's kind of, it's as close as I can get to living that dream. And then just like the competitive nature, the friendships, being able to have a reason. I think so much of life, we get so busy in our different directions that we're going, that if we don't have that reason to stop and to talk to somebody, then you don't talk to them. And so that's, at least that's my nature. And fantasy is that reason to talk to people to, and then Dynasty is just so much on top of it. And I'm a terrible redraft player now because I focus so solely on Dynasty. But to be able to build teams long term, like have a plan, have a vision, like how can I execute this? How can I, what direction can I go? Is it the right time to go this way or that way? And so I've always loved trades, and that's one of my favorite elements of fantasy, working out a trade and just kind of that satisfaction when you are able to work out a trade and get that guy that you've been targeting. Things that I've always enjoyed. That's probably my most favorite thing about fantasy, is the trading element, but all just the layers on top of it.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Can you name a person in the fantasy industry that you'd want to watch a football game with, just to hear their insight and perspective on the game?
I mean, I get to do a podcast every Thursday night with Matt Waldman, and that's pretty fantastic. That's somebody that I've looked up for a long time, to have his perspective on games, and to be able to. I've been so grateful and thankful to have that opportunity this year to really kind of step forward in that. I mean, the Audible Live is like something that I've listened to for 10 years, and so it's just a surreal experience to be able to plug in on Thursday evening and to be able to represent that brand is just really special. And so to be able to have, maybe with the camera off, to be able to spend some time with Matt probably would be up there. Another person that has really, that I haven't mentioned yet, that's been really instrumental in my journey, is Matt Harmon. Was somebody that I looked up to quite a bit when he was his journey, when he was with Footballguys, when he moved on with Yahoo. I actually, so in 2019, I ended up in the Yahoo Listener League, and that was like the first year they did the Yahoo Listener League. And so that was an opportunity to meet Matt. And so I played in the league with him, and like we would just kind of DM. I didn't want to bother him with too much, but like you just kind of DM with like life stuff or whatnot, and just kind of talk. And then when I really was going to dive into fantasy, I kind of reached out to him and was like, what do you think about this? And he was like, go for it, man. He was like, and so he's always been a huge supporter. That was one of my highlights of the expo this past year, was being able to meet him in person. And that was just great. And so he's another person that I would love to have a moment of just sit down and watch the game together, and just kind of no pressure, just hang out.
Yeah, no, that was so cool to have him at the expo.
Yeah.
Meeting him in person finally after all these years, and what a great guy. I mean, such a great guy, and such an influential guy when it comes to, the game, and in so many different ways, but just a great human being. So having him at the expo and seeing how much fun he had, I mean, he had a great time. So I'm pretty sure he's coming back. So that's always cool to see, right? Now, when it comes to creating content in this space, what's the most difficult challenge that you've experienced thus far?
Time management. I mean, it's hard. It's been, I'm very tired, to be honest with you. It's the grind week to week is difficult. To be able to have balance, and I've been able to learn that balance just means boundaries is what it really is. And so that's one of the things that we talked pre-show about. I've been pretty aggressive about, Sunday is committed to football, and actually during the games, like I almost is like almost the time when I have the least commitment to football of the day, of like, because I take my daughter we did gymnastics, or they did cheerleading this past Sunday. So it was always at noon, they would have cheerleading. And so like I'd sit there the hour before games and watch them do cheerleading. And so kind of have one eye on making sure that any late breaking news, my lineups weren't messed up or my rankings were fine in ECR. But other than that, disconnecting and spending the time with them. But like Sunday is is football day, and then that rolls into now we record the Dynasty show on Monday night. So now Monday with Monday Night Football is kind of natural, and I've tried to be very aggressive and protective about Tuesday and Wednesday, kind of being like, let's put us aside as much as we can. And that's difficult because I do a Dynasty Roundtable that takes up Wednesday night kind of, and making sure that my ranks are good to go. So it's trying to find that balance. And then Thursday night is full commitment to football, between recording multiple shows and watching Thursday Night Football. Friday is a disconnect day. Friday is, I try very hard not to be on Twitter. I come home, like it's all family. And then kind of Saturday rolls into Saturday morning is all family. I coached my daughter's soccer team this past fall. And so that was Saturday morning was coaching 5-year-old soccer and just being off of things. And so that's been one of the things of navigating social media, I think is so hard, because it's been, it can consume you if you let it. And so that's been, and I think that I've gotten a lot more perspective on that over the last couple of months, over the last year, on how I approach social media. I'm much more intentional with my time, and I use it as connection to talk to my friends and get some stuff out. I don't tweet nearly as much as I used to. I'm not on the timeline nearly as much as I used to, because there would just be days where I would get home at the end of the day and I'd be like, what did I do today? Like, I didn't get anything done. And it's like, because it's such a time suck on there. And so learning how to navigate that and kind of, and so there's just such a push pull with that, because as you pull back and become more protective in some areas, some people are like, hey, he changed, or like, what's going on there? And it's like, no, I'm just realizing that maybe I went way too hard in one direction, and now I need to center and level. And that's one of the things that Joe Bryant talks about quite a bit is, he always approaches it as there's 3 major tent poles in my life, and there's my real career, there is fantasy football in that industry, and then there's my family, and it needs to lean harder probably towards the other temples. And it's naturally like I want to lean it in one direction, but you can't really do that and when to sacrifice the other ones. And so that's been just those understanding and developing those tools to manage those aspects of life has been the most difficult thing.
Yeah, I was just going to ask next, how do you balance your 2 careers? But you've brought so much more into it when it comes to just, family and the career and fantasy and all. I mean, it's a lot, right? So, but
Yeah.
you're doing it. It's just a matter
Yeah.
of creating some boundaries. I like that.
Yeah, and it's creating boundaries, and it's being intentional, and it's getting things done. Having that, making sure, and it's a lot of it's staying up until it's done, or setting aside I try very, very hard not to be on Twitter, not to be doing any sort of content when family time is around, or like that those couple hours when I come home from work and I'm feeding the girls, putting them to bed, those types of things, or on the weekend as much as I can. And then occasionally there is that go to my wife and say, hey, I've tried very hard to balance, to manage these things. I need some time here to get this done. And so I try very hard to avoid that. And it's a lot of sacrifice is really the only way. And so I used to play a lot of video games. I hardly play video games now, and just kind of sacrifices in those areas. I haven't been able to play. I was a golfer growing up. I played golf in high school. I've played golf twice in the past 2 years, and so that's been hard. So that it's just these different directions. But we've gotten pool passes the last 2 years, and I go to take my daughters to the pool, and it's fantastic. I love it. But it's those dedication and really making sure that when you set that time aside, that you're not on Twitter, that you're actually writing the article, and like those types of things.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's a challenge for sure. Now, how has your background as a CPA influenced your fantasy analysis, or has it in any way?
I mean, I have a natural inclination for numbers, and numbers make sense to me. But it's interesting to me because, and I have so much respect for people that have a hard analytical lean. And Jacob Sanderson is somebody that I've known for a long time. That he was involved in fantasy intervention when I got started there, and he's got a strong analytical lean. And I've talked to him through different things. And like, I have deep respect for analytics, but then at the same time, like, I don't want to do it like in fantasy. Like I lean a lot harder towards I just love football, and so like the understanding of like how a player is going to be used in scheme and like those types of things. And so as much as I have a numbers background, I almost don't bring it into fantasy too much because I do it as my day job. And so like football's my taps, like it's, it's, I don't know if it's right brain, left brain, but like I'm using one side during the day. I want to use the other side when I'm doing the content creation. So as much as I have a natural inclination towards numbers, I use them when I in order to paint the picture to arrive at the solution. But at the same time, like I want to be able to teach people about like why this player might succeed. And so especially doing like the rookie guide and so much of that rookie analysis and being heavily tape based in that, and watching players. And I did the wide receivers this year. The wide receivers have kind of becoming my niche in that, and understanding this is what this player can do, and this is how it translates. These are the teams that need this. This is where it's going to fit. And then watching through the process, seeing where they end up and saying, yes, that's a home run. So like Puka Nacua is a guy that when I watched his tape, so there's one offense that I think fits him very, very well. And he landed in that offense. And so it was kind of that type of thing.
Yeah, it's like Achan landed in Miami. It's like
Yes.
when you know, right?
Yep. Yep.
So one other question here: when you set your fantasy or your Twitter profile name is for whom J Bell tolls, did you know you nailed it right away?
And that was like an OG, like when Twitter started, like that's when I made that name. And it was kind of one of those things of like what's my name going to be? And just kind of playing with the characters that I had available. And it was just kind of naturally fit. And I was like, it just clicked like right when I did it. And that was 10 years before I was ever involved in fantasy. I mean, that was like the advent of Twitter. And so like I was on it like early adapter, and I was really just reading like stuff on there. I was hardly tweeting at all. And it was kind of the type of thing. I was like, I don't have for 10 years or whatever it was. I had
Yeah.
8 Twitter followers, and it was like, I think half of them were bots. And so it was like, well, I'm going to tweet like I've got 8 followers. It's not going anywhere. But
Yeah.
then diving down the fantasy rabbit hole. Yeah. It's worked very well for me, I think.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Thank
Now,
you.
obviously, you've talked about family a little bit. What's your favorite part of being a girl dad?
The pool, man. I love going to the pool with my daughters. Is the pool is fantastic. We've had pool passes the last 2 years, and that's really my opportunity to just there is no distraction. There is no, you can't be on your phone at the pool. You're in the pool, you're committed. That it was really fun. Like last night, I've been reading to my daughter, and so like she had the iPad out last night when we were snuggling in bed when she was going to bed, and she was bringing up football stories. My daughter, my 8-year-old, has really started to show a major interest in football. So like she's decided she's a Dolphins fan, and so when they played the Eagles on Sunday Night Football a couple weeks ago, she was like, Dad, can I stay up a little bit to watch this? And like we snuggled together and watched that game, and her asking questions about it. And so last night she pulled up and these stories about kind of like the history, these kids' stories about the history of the Dolphins and the history of the Bills. And she just gives me so much crap about the Bills, about her being a Dolphins fan.
Oh,
And
fun.
so it was like these stories to talk about, like, oh, the Dolphins have won 2 Super Bowls. And she was just, take it, Dad. And it's like, they won in like 1972. Like, come on, kid. But it's just being able to share those elements as they grow, and it's great right now because I have an 8, a 5, and a 2-year-old, and so they are just in different stages, and it's just fantastic to be able to experience the different stage with each of them. So I mean everything outside of the meltdowns and like the not going to bed, those types of things. But it's I really enjoy it.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool to see the different stages in real time, right?
Yes.
That's good. No, so yeah, our daughter just turned 11 a couple days ago, and she's playing in the Ian Fishbowl, like Scott Fishbowl
Nice.
Jr., right? So
Yeah.
so we're having fun. Last year she played in fantasy for the first time. We went to just try to get on a public league. We kind of clicked at the same time to get into the league at the same time. It took us 5 tries to get in. I declined every time. She accepted, so she ended up being in 5 leagues last year. So she got a good taste of it, right?
Yeah.
So she's had fun with that. It's so funny. I mean, she has to be a Seahawks fan first,
Yeah.
but Dolphins, she loves the Dolphins too.
Yes.
She likes Tua, and she loves the Dolphins colors. And when she decided to be a Dolphins fan, I think she had a Dolphin kick for a little while, so she likes the Dolphins. That's
Yes.
I love that.
My daughter loves the Dolphins. She likes Jalen Waddle is her favorite player. I
Yeah.
believe she idolized her first grade teacher. She's second grade now, but I think her first grade teacher was a Dolphins fan, so I think that's where it kind of came from. But also like
Oh, funny.
the aqua and the orange.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
naturally. I always tease Troy all the time, and I'm like, your team is the favorite team of little girls.
Yeah, no, it truly is. But I can't imagine as a Bills fan I mean, if my daughter
It's
was
rough.
a Niners fan, that would be very challenging.
It's
Although
rough because
uh,
and some of it I think is just to be like to poke at dad a little bit is probably part of it because like she's got
that's good.
a Bills cheerleader outfit that she had as a kid and like got pictures of she always like she would love to we'd watch games and I would always play up when there's touchdowns like I would have her cheer and like we'd throw up in the air like every time that like Ohio State or the Bills would score a touchdown and it was like I would watch Red Zone and she'd be playing in the other room and she'd peek her head in like, Dad, did the Bills score a touchdown yet? So we can cheer and like,
Oh,
so I think that it's there. It's just they're going through phases right now. But
it's just a phase. It's just
yeah,
a phase.
she did cheerleading though this year for the first time, and like
No
she's
fun.
was into that. And then one of her favorite shows, I don't know if you know Bella and the Bulldogs. So that's
No.
yeah, Bella and the Bulldog. Your daughter is probably would be a good age for it. My
Okay.
daughter's probably a little bit too young for it, but it's a like one of those Nickelodeon like tween shows. But like
Okay. Okay.
the cheerleader becomes the quarterback, and so
Oh,
like
really? Okay.
yeah, so she's all about that, and so just kind of it's been great to see her go on the football journey. The other night she listens to podcasts before bed, and it's like Rebel Girls and those types of things, and she was like, Dad, I want to listen to a kids football podcast, and so like we were like, Alexa, play a kids football podcast, and they played the footballers actually, and she
Oh,
was
fun.
like, and I was like, "Is this good?" She's like, "Yeah, this is great. This is what I want." I was like, "Okay." And so she listened to them a couple nights, and then I put my podcast on for the Dynasty show, and she was like, "That's you." And so she's starting to plow through our old episodes of the Dynasty show, and
Oh,
she doesn't know what's going on, but at the same time, like she's listening to it, she's learning for sure.
that's awesome. Yeah. So our daughter, she listens. We've listened to the Spitballers forever, right?
Yeah,
So she's known Andy, Mike, and Jason forever, and like Jason's her favorite, and like they kind of have a thing back and forth a little bit. Um, and then yeah, so she loves Spitballers, but then last night she went to bed watching some start sits and salutations, and
here
she's
we go.
just now thinks Joey Wright's the funniest guy in the world.
As she should. We love Joey.
We love Joey for sure. So actually, when it comes to the real game, football 2023, it's we're heading into week, I don't know, what is it, 9 or so. What players have been the most disappointing or surprising to you thus far?
I mean, disappointing. J.K. Dobbins just crushed me. Seeing him go down week 1, I was very, very high on him. He was my running back 7 in pre-draft ranks, and so I was like way out in the crowd on him because when I did my projections, I mean that's just where it came out. And so seeing him go down week 1, and then Nick Chubb going down week 2, I think has been two of the biggest disappointments because Dobbins is a crusher for me as an Ohio State fan, knowing the injuries that he's had to start his career, then kind of being in that contract year of like, this is the make or break time for you. And to have that injury happen to him, that's my biggest disappointment. I was like the guys that are underperforming or like kind of, I have the view of like, we got time, they can turn it around or that like, I always just view the real disappointments are the guys that we just don't get to watch and that
Yeah.
are, and it's easy, like the human side. It's easy to not think about the human side, but then like to when you do think about it, of like realizing like this is a human that a man that is going through just a career crossroads, like just a life like
Yeah.
changing event. And so those are always my biggest disappointments, the players that get hurt and we just don't get to see.
Yeah, injuries are definitely worst, and that is true. We don't, as fans, you don't think about what they got to go through. But
Yeah.
Stephania Bell does a great job with kind of reinforcing that fact that like these people now have to go through this journey. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen obviously a lot of injuries in my time, and just the recovery, the rehab that has to go into it. It's a lot, and it's definitely the downside of athletics. But I guess it's part of the deal. It's definitely
Yeah.
the disappointing part in fantasy, though, is
Yeah.
when you have you put so much into certain roster builds, and it all falls apart. So you got to
Yep.
learn to adapt to survive a fantasy football season. Now, is there a quarterback, a running back, a wide receiver, and a tight end that you're excited for? Just like it's one from each position, excited for the rest of the way that you think is going to really stand out and get things right.
I'll go wide receiver. I'll go with CeeDee Lamb. I think that they've figured some things out there. I'm excited for him to turn it around. I mean, Joe Burrow, I think, is a natural candidate for that. The way that that slow start there, I think things have rounded in the way that he performed against the 49ers. I actually get to go to the game this week, and so I'm excited about that. The Bills-Bengals game, so I get to see both him and Josh Allen in person. I think that that's a player that he's gotten over that hump in the injury, and I expect that he's going to finish strong, and that's going to cause some league shifts because the teams that drafted him probably had a slow start. Running back, Chuba Hubbard is one that I'm really intrigued by how he's going to finish the year, because he's really, I mean, he came into the year clearly behind Miles Sanders. If you look back at the week 1 usage, I mean, Miles Sanders was a bell cow usage week 1, and I really think that Hubbard has overtaken him, and I think that he's really an under the radar guy for a lot of people, and I think a lot of people have written him off in terms of not thinking he's all that good, but I think he's got a great opportunity ahead of him that he can really seize that job and finish strong. I said CeeDee Lamb, tight end Dalton Kincaid. I'm going to be a homer here. I'm going to go with Dalton Kincaid. I think it's really clicked the last 2 weeks. He looks very natural. I think the Bills have had kind of do some soul searching and what they wanted to be that offense, and so they didn't use him early, or when they did use him, they kept him very close to the line of scrimmage. Now they're starting to stretch him out a little bit, and he's adding that extra element. It's really interesting what they've done, because they brought Gabe Davis a lot closer to the line of scrimmage than what he's normally operated at, and they've used kind of inverted and allowed Kincaid to stretch a little bit more. And so I think that he's going to have a strong finish to the year.
Great. Excellent advice for sure. Now, Jeff, you have done a great job throughout this whole podcast, kind of talking about people that have had an impact on you.
Yeah.
You gave a lot of great advice when it comes to people that are looking to get into the industry in regards to like balance and whatnot. But are there anyone else you want to mention that you have that I guess that has had a huge impact on you during your journey?
Joey Wright is another one. Give JL Garofalo a shout out. JL's been fantastic, a sounding board whenever I've needed a little bit of advice. Gosh, I feel like I've name dropped about everybody that I can possibly name drop so far, but it's just been, it takes a village, I think, in all of us. And I think that we all kind of recognize that. And so the openness that I've experienced, the help that people have just been so willing, that times that have reached out to them and asked for help in different areas, I try very hard not to. I don't know. I'm the mindset of like, I don't want to bother them. They're doing their own thing. And like, I certainly understand how busy everybody are now. But I'm just grateful for just the guidance and the friendships I've been able to make.
That's great. Now, any advice for people that want to get into the industry at this time?
Advice right now, it starts with Twitter. It starts with social media. I would say, hold yourself out well on social media, make connections, find people that, my biggest thing, and I think that one of the things that has allowed me to succeed with Football Guys is, find the content that you enjoy, the brand that you enjoy, tailor your content towards that, and write a lot. And so many people just want a podcast, and that's great. Podcasts are fun. I'm having a great time talking to you tonight. But if you really want to get involved in the industry, you need to write a ton. And so that was one of the things that I've always enjoyed writing. When I got involved, like if you can go back and read my Going for Two stuff, it is wild. It's like completely off the wall, not what you would normally read in fantasy. And I kind of had the mindset of when I get to where I want to get to, I'm going to have to write to a certain theme, more or less, or in a certain way. But before I get there, I want to just kind of play around and play in the sandbox and just kind of learn and develop different tools. And so that's my biggest advice is do it. Like that's what Clayton always says is just do it first off. And so start to write, start to put your thoughts down, read a lot, read the people that you respect, the people that you enjoy. Use that to develop your own voice. One of the things that Matthew Berry always says is be the best you. And so I think that's all fantastic advice. There's so many listen to what people say. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've seen of people that have struggled to make positive steps forward to those types of things is listen to what is said and follow those examples, follow those models, but work very, very hard. Try to do something different as well as you can. It's really hard to do something different because there's only so much that we can talk about. You can only, there's 30 running backs a week that are worth talking about. And so to be able to do something different is hard there, but try your best. But again, just write a ton and then make those connections. When you do make those connections, my biggest thing is work as having some level of like a dossier of some level of like, this is my work. And so that when you do get those opportunities to talk to a Joe Bryan or an Andy Behrens or somebody like that, you can say, this is my work. This is what I do. And so having that is the biggest thing. And don't focus on the step that you're at right now. Like, don't try to make a big leap because some people have, and that's great, but some people haven't, and some people it takes a slower path, and everybody's path is different, but everybody can get to where they want to go. But just keep positive and keep working hard.
Outstanding advice, Jeff, for sure. Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to share before we close things out?
Man, I don't think so. I just thank you so much for this opportunity, and you're somebody that I've really enjoyed your content. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and everything that you put out. I think you are somebody that holds the community, that represents the community very, very well. And it's been great to have the opportunities that we have had to be able to talk. Not enough. I need to talk to you more, Kevin, but it's been great when we have been able to.
Hey, no, I totally agree. I'm on the same page with you. I'm looking forward to, connecting more with you in the future. But again, it's just so weird to have Twitter come alive and to have met you and interacted with you over the years. So it's it's an honor to have you on here. Like I said before, I really appreciate what you're doing. For me, I love celebrating this game of fantasy. So anything I can do to help out, I'm here to help share resources and celebrate this industry as well. So tell the listeners where they can find you.
Footballguys.com. You can find me at footballguys.com. I am on the Football Guys Dynasty Show. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Football Guys Dynasty Show. I am on the Football Guys DFS Show. And then I am on the Football Guys. And shout out to Devin Knotts and Phil Alexander, too. I've not name dropped them yet, too. But it's been great to be able to do the DFS Show with them this year. That's been learning a different element. And that's been a great opportunity. The Audible live on Thursday night. You can find us on Twitter, on social media, going live on Thursday night, and then coming out to your local podcast feed through the Audible with myself and Matt Waldman. You can find me really Football Guys, and then Twitter at For Whom J Bell Tolls are going to be the areas that you're going to be able to find me.
There you go. Make sure to get to footballguys.com. Enjoy all that great content. There's no shortage of it. Incredible people there, on every level. So follow everybody there. But obviously, if you love this podcast, definitely jump on board and subscribe to everything that Jeff Bell is doing. Thank you so much for joining me, my friend.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.